Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here, and today I'm checking out the update 47 PTS patch notes. This patch is still about a month and a half away, and it's not looking super good so far. I did briefly preview this. I've been checking out what other creators have been talking about, and yeah, there's definitely a batch of nerfs here that we need to discuss. Some major changes for subclassing, which I'm not sure are the best. Good thing though is it's only week 1 and we still have a lot of time to give feedback, so that's what this video is all about. We're going to jump straight into combat and gameplay changes. In this intro section, they're talking about the changes that they are trying to accomplish. Just as an overview, I'm going to read through some of this. So they say that they still have a few adjustments to make, talking about subclassing here, largely aimed at correcting some of the less ideal behavior we're seeing with passive slot effects. Abilities like Grim Focused and Bound Armor are often being used purely passively, granting more power than we're happy with for how simple they're being used. So we're going to do some gentle reworking of what they grant, aka there are nerfs on the way. Stay tuned for that. In this update, neither of these abilities nor their morphs will grant unique unnamed effects for slotting. Instead, they'll be granting major or minor effects. Additionally, they're taking a stab at ultimate generation and how high it can get by converting many unique ultimate sources to the major and minor system. Again, I'm not sure this is the best route to take, but we'll look at it specifically in just a minute. All right, jumping down to the general section, there are a good amount of bug fixes here that I'm not really too concerned about. Basically, I want to talk about this section, which is having to do with ultimate generation and passives. So again, this is what they're planning so far for update 47, which is the next major update for ESO. The following passives, granting unique forms of ultimate when meeting their conditions, have been converted to grant major and minor heroism to prevent them from stacking with one another. Total amount of ultimate granted will be identical, but will not stack with additional sources and will take more time to generate. Okay, so this is pretty much hitting a lot of classes, almost all of them it looks like. Mountain's Blessing is a Dragonite passive. This now grants minor heroism for 4.5 seconds with a 6-second cooldown, rather than, the unnamed 3 ultimate with a 6-second cooldown. Transfer is a Nightblade passive. This now grants minor heroism with a 4-second cooldown. Catalyst, this is also a Nightblade passive, now grants major heroism for 15 seconds rather than just a flat 30 ultimate. This also means the ultimate will now only generate in combat. Prism, which is a Templar passive, now grants minor heroism. I think you're seeing the pattern here. Savage Beast, which is a Warden passive, now grants minor heroism for 6 seconds. Corpse Consumption, which is a Necromancer passive, grants minor heroism. And Implacable Outcome, the Arcanist passive, now grants minor heroism. So I think you guys get the point of this. Instead of these passives giving you just flat amounts of ultimates, they're wanting to give you the buff instead. Now, let me tell you first off why I think this is a bad idea. Number one, it's pretty boring. Just having the same buff, in this case, one of them is different, major heroism, on Catalyst, doesn't make the classes feel any different from one another. Second issue is that minor heroism is a pretty common buff in the game already. I mean, if you are, which you may be as a viewer of this channel, an enjoyer of Oaken Soul builds, guess what? Your Oaken Soul ring already gives you minor heroism, and so now all of these class passives literally will give you nothing for using them because you already have that buff 100% of the time thanks to the Oaken Soul ring. There are other sets in the game which give you minor heroism. You can also get it from certain abilities. You can even get it from minor heroism potions, which I would say, since most builds will have, some form of minor heroism active, there's no reason anymore to craft minor heroism potions. And so that was kind of like an end game strategy, right? Is you would work on your build, get all the buffs that you needed, freeing up a potion slot so that you could now get minor heroism from a potion. There's really no reason to do that since you're going to have it up so often now with these passives. So obviously, I think you can tell I'm not a fan of this change. I don't think it's interesting. I don't think it's fun gameplay. I do kind of understand why maybe they would want to do this, but I think perhaps there are better ways of doing it. Minor heroism doesn't seem to be the play on its own for the reasons that I mentioned, particularly for like Oakensoul, Ring. I would like to see them at least add maybe a secondary effect to these passives if they are going to continue this route, because like I said, with certain sets, particularly Oakensoul Ring builds, you're going to get zero benefit from using these passives, which I think is unfortunate. So a few other changes here in the Alliance War skill line. Barrier, replenishing barrier is now no longer going to grant ultimate when the shield ends. Instead, they increase the magic restore instead. In Fighters Guild of Evil Hunter, this now applies its bonus to Torchbearer, which is a good thing. And then Mage's Guild Shooting Star got nerfed as well in terms of the ultimate generation. This now has a maximum of 6 stacks, or 6 times you can gain ultimate from enemies that you hit with this ability, rather than no limit. So that's definitely a big change in terms of the potential power of this skill. Let's get into class abilities next, starting with Necromancer. In Gravelord Flameskull, they resolved the issue where corpses generated from this ability and its morphs could not be replaced, causing you to quickly reach the summoned limit and be unable to activate other summon abilities. So this is a good change, a bug fix for Flameskull. But now we really get into the big changes with the Nightblade class. And I will say that I was expecting some type of adjustment for Nightblade, specifically because the majority of endgame builds in Update 46 are running Herald of the Tome and Assassination, right? And particularly one skill here, which we'll talk about. So it is getting adjusted. Whether that's fair or not, we can talk about. But Grim Focus, this ability and its morphs now grant Major Prophecy and Savagery, which is a 12% critical chance buff, for slotting it on either bar. These abilities no longer grant increasing weapon and spell damage per stack, and these abilities now play their special sound effects when reaching their activation. Relentless Focus, this morph now ranks up in cost reduction since there's no weapon and spell damage granted per stack any longer, and instead this morph reduces the number of stacks needed to activate the ability to 4, down from 5. So a couple things here. Number one, not surprised that they changed this. This skill in Update 46 is a massive source of damage. You were getting upwards of 400 passive weapon and spell damage, and that was even scaling up from your buffs like Major Brutality and Sorcery. This honestly should have happened before Update 46 launched. I don't know what happened here. I'm assuming they just ran out of time because they didn't really do a lot of adjustments to skills in Update 46. But I mean, yes, this makes sense. And it's going to mean that, what they want to accomplish is less passive gameplay, right? They don't want people slotting a skill on their back bar, maybe not even bar swapping, right? Which you could do and still gaining 500 to 600 weapon and spell damage. They don't want that for the combat of ESO, which I understand, but the problem is they already gave it to players for an entire patch, and now they're taking it back, right? So, not a great look for them. I wish they would have made this adjustment before Update 46 went live. Basically, the thinking here is if you are trying to progress content with your group, if you're trying to do like hard mode achievements and stuff, you better get it done now before this update happens, because they are rolling back a lot of power, particularly for DPS builds, I think is what we're looking at. If you're a solo player, I don't think this really affects you as much, and I actually do like the direction they're taking this, where you get Major Prophecy and Savagery. This is actually going to free up potentially a bar space for you, which is really important with subclassing now. I am probably still going to use this, probably as a back bar skill, just to get Major Prophecy and Savagery for a lot of builds. The thing to remember too is you still get the Nightblade passives, which I'm kind of surprised they didn't touch the Nightblade passives. Fingers crossed they don't do that, because that's actually where a lot of the power from Nightblade subclassing comes into play with Assassination, all the crit chance and crit damage. I think if they don't touch those, then this is in a fine position. Like I said, you can still run this for the crit chance buff, and you can still run other abilities. You still have Soul Harvest, which is an amazing ultimate. You still have, Killer's Blade for the execute. You still have a DPS spammable and surprise attack. So it's still a very good skill line that personally I will still continue to run. Let's talk about Shadow next. Shadow Cloak, this ability and the Shadowy Disguise morph now grant minor protection for slotting rather than prophecy and savagery. So they moved the buff over from this one. And then they changed the Dark Cloak morph. The bonus healing condition now requires you to be actively bracing, which is holding block, rather than to not be moving. Okay, so you can move and block and you can get the bonus, I guess, as long as you're blocking. So yeah, this mostly applies to tanks, which would need that heal. I don't really use this as much on my tank. If you do, let me know if you think this is a positive benefit for the skill or if it just makes it more difficult to use. Sorcerer got a surprising amount of changes as well, starting with Bound Armor. This ability and the Bound Aegis morph now passively grant Major Resolve, which is 6k armor essentially, for slotting on either bar rather than granting Minor Protection, which reduces damage taken, and increasing Max Magicka. So they really, I won't say they gutted the skill, but they completely changed what it does. And it looks like they're sort of wanting to make Daedric Summoning like the tank, the quote-unquote tank skill line for the Sorcerer, which I think there are some problems with that too, which we'll get into. But basically, Bound Aegis, which was giving you a ton of Max Magicka, also Minor Protection, it's not going to do that anymore. It's going to give you Major Resolve, and I believe this still has Minor Resolve on it. So it's giving you a lot of armor, which I guess, makes sense for a tank if this is now truly the tank skill line. But it's really not a tank skill line because you have damage dealing skills here too. It's just really confusing. Let's keep going. Bound Armaments, which was like the stamina morph. This now grants you Major Sorcery and Prophecy, which is 12% crit chance for slotting rather than 8% max stamina. So yeah, this is like a damage dealer ability. I don't like that they're taking away the resource component of this for sorcerers because this was really nice to have either 8% max magicka or 8% max stamina. It made sorcerers feel a little bit more unique if you really wanted to play off max stats. So the fact that that's gone, I don't like that either. So yeah, it just feels a little bit clunky what they're trying to do here. I'm not sure that this really fits the skill line or the concept of the sorcerer to begin with. But let's keep going. Dark Exchange and the Dark Deal morph. This morph no longer grants you Minor Force. This morph's Minor Berserk is no longer half as long as the base ability. Okay, so it's still giving you Minor Berserk. Dark Deal is not a great skill. It's not in a good place now that you have access to better class lines like siphoning from the Nightblades. So I don't know. I think these skills need a little bit more work, honestly. And then Storm Calling. This is really the big one for me, and I know a lot of other players are not liking this change. Lightning Form, which also counts for Hurricane, this ability and its morphs now grant Minor Force while active rather than Major Resolve. Okay, so this has a lot of issues too, in my opinion. This is a great skill line, or has been a great skill line for solo builds, because you have healing and you have defensive skills in combination with a bit of damage, right? So a big part of that was Lightning Form and Hurricane, where you could get Major Resolve. Without Major Resolve, it does make the Storm Calling skill line less desirable, especially for solo builds where you do need that Major Resolve buff. So I think that's unfortunate. Number two, Minor Force. I don't think you really need Minor Force from class skill lines necessarily. Number one, a lot of players now are using the Velothi Mage's Amulet Mythic, which gives you Minor Force by default. Of course, if you're using Oaken Soul Ring, you're also getting Minor Force. And then most builds that aren't using either of those mythics are going to use Barb Trap anyways for the damage and the access to Minor Force. So again, I just don't think anybody asked for these changes, and it just kind of confuses the skill lines a little bit more, especially with Major Resolve. You guys, there's not that many ways to get Major Resolve with subclassing, and I think that's a big problem, especially for solo builds, because when you're soloing, you want more damage, right? So you want to run skill lines like Assassination, like Herald of the Tome, like Storm Calling, for example, but you still need Major Resolve. You need that extra armor, and you don't want to have to just run a tank skill line if that's the only buff that you need. So another issue, is that there's not really a good, consistent source for scribing to make a Major Resolve, like to actually make a armor buff. So if they're kind of going in this direction where Major Resolve is only going to belong in the tank skill lines, then we need more sources of that for like solo builds and PvP builds and DPS builds to get that, either through scribing or through some other means. But speaking of scribing, the other major change here has to do with the scribing skill called Banner Bearer. This is one that I use on my Arcanist DPS build to generate Crux. I believe it generates a new Crux every 5 seconds. So obviously it's really good for powering your Fate Carver beam, but they are going to do away with that, according to this in update 47. So they adjusted the combination effect of the class mastery script. As an Arcanist, this effect will now only generate a Crux if you have no Crux active, which, if you know the Arcanist class skill lines, you already have a skill which does this, which is a Tome Bearer's Inspiration and the other morph. This is the exact same ability that this is exactly what those skills do, and most Arcanist builds run those skills already. So this really makes no sense. In the developer comment, they're talking about how, again, they want less passive interactions with combat. Basically, they don't want you to be, at 3 stacks of Crux basically passively, which I understand, but this is definitely not the way to do it. I mean, just in terms of fairness, people spent a ton of time grinding their class scripts. They're not easy to get. And so this is in the garbage if this script stays the way it is for the Arcanist class in update 47. So I really hope that they do some additional updates on this. I can understand them not wanting totally passive Crux generation, but it needs to give Arcanist mains something a little bit better so that it's still at least usable, especially for damage dealers, which are used to using this skill already. But that is basically it in terms of class and skill balance changes. Right now, I definitely want to get your opinion on this. So definitely drop a comment down below if you think these balance changes are fair, or if there's some different direction that you think the developers should take a look at. It is still extremely early. I'm hoping that the dev team does take feedback at this point. So let's give them as much feedback as possible with these changes. So make sure you leave a comment down below. Go comment on the PTS forums as well. And thanks again for watching. Hey everybody, just a quick note that if you're liking the new subclassing builds for ESO, I'm also releasing even more for our Tier 2 channel members called the Elite Squad, like our brand new solo subclassing Stamina Templar build called the Golden Saint. This one is a ton of fun to play as well, with massive damage, self-healing, and survivability. Great for soloing dungeon bosses, world bosses, even some trials bosses. It's amazing. Plus we also have our new subclassing Druid build. Also a ton of fun to play. This one feels basically like a brand new class in the Elder Scrolls Online. It's pretty epic. Members of our Tier 2 Elite Squad can unlock these builds right now, along with dozens of other members-only builds and guides. So if you're interested in supporting the channel, it really is the best way to do that because you get a truckload of bonus content, not to mention early access to videos and members-only Discord. Just make sure to select the Elite Squad option if you're interested. And to get started, just click on the join button down below or the membership link in the description to see our complete library of members-only builds and guides that we built up over many years. And huge shout out, as always, to our channel members who make this channel possible. I truly could not do what I do without you. So thanks again. Thanks to all of you for watching this video. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next one.